to be with you on this Tuesday edition of Ed Schultz News and Commentary. As I mentioned to you yesterday, I've been gone for a few days. We went down south and bask in the sun a little bit. And when you're away for a few days, even though you pick up some news clips and whatnot, by the way, Mexican television is the worst, but whatever. After you're away from it for a few days and you come back and digest it 24/7, you see the forest and the trees. And looking at the Republicans, it really is a situation where they have got to be so horribly frustrated with their field. Now, Trump is out there doing what he's doing because he talks like you and me. He gives an unvarnished opinion. There's a real appeal to that. Bush can't do that. Rubio's trying to do it. Cruz is too much of an extremist. And Carson, let's cut to the chase on Carson for a moment. You mean to tell me that Southern white Republicans are going to be motivated to vote for a black man? It isn't going to happen. And the Republicans know this, that their voter turnout in the South, if Ben Carson is the nominee, is going to be weak because there's a lot of white folks in this country that will not vote for a black man, especially in the South. You mean to tell me you think that Ben Carson can win North Carolina? I don't think so. You think he can win Virginia? I don't think so. And I think the Republicans know this. And it's going to be a heavy lift for Carson to win in Ohio. He's not connected to regular folks. And who on the Republican side is connected to the 51% of Americans who make less than $30,000 a year? That is the number. And the question comes up, what middle class are we talking about? And this has been the huge disconnect between the Republicans, who are the elitists and the corporatists, and the purists when it comes to their moral fiber. They've lost most of America. And so they need the Koch brothers to cash whip all of these county executives and all of these state level governments so they can get the country the way they want it. But demographically, it's a nightmare for them. So the Republican Party is fading. And even Reince Priebus said the other day that if they lose 2016, they're in trouble. There's no doubt they are. But looking at it as a field right now, Bush is running a campaign like it's 1990. He's so yesteryear. He just can't generate any enthusiasm. And you can just tell by looking at him that he just can't believe this shit's going on. Cruz is an extremist. And then there's Rubio. Yesterday I was listening to Rubio on the POTUS channel on Sirius. And he was talking about how he wants to be the vocational president. That he wants to get money to those folks in this country who go to a vocational school and come out with a trade. The guy has no compass whatsoever about what he wants to do economically. And that's backed up by the fact that Rubio's never had to meet payroll. Rubio can't even run his own personal finances. He's probably a good family man, good father, whatever. He misses votes in the Senate. And Donald Trump is the guy that has come out and pointed out, this is the way the guy was down in Florida. And I know Florida better than any of these guys. So I don't see Bush making a move. I don't see Rubio making a move. I don't see Carson getting the full-throated endorsement of the Republican Party. It's Trump. And the amazing thing about Trump is he doesn't have a spokesperson. He does all his own media. There's a freshness to that people enjoy. But let's back up to where we are in the Republican field for just a moment. President Obama hit on something. He was in New York last night, and he was at a fundraiser of some 1,300 people, and he took a stab at the CNBC moderators and how the Republicans are all twisted up about the fact that they don't like the moderators. Listen to this.
Every one of these candidates say, Obama's weak. Putin's kicking sand in his face. When I talk to Putin, he's going to straighten out. Just looking at him, he's going to be. And then it turns out they can't handle a bunch of CNBC moderators.
I have struggled with President Obama as of late because of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. That may be the best line and the most profound thing he has said in a long time. That's where the Republicans are. They're whiners. They have no plan. And again, Trump comes out and he wants to negotiate his own deal with the networks for when it comes to a debate. He's just ahead of the crowd. He has an unbelievable media moxie, a feel for where the folks are, what the situation is. And I would venture to say that that is a quality that a president needs. So whereas many Americans may be in astonishment that they didn't see this Trump thing coming, guess what? It's still here. And he won't back off. First, he's going after Bush for a few weeks. Now he's got Rubio in his sights. Listen to this.
Jim, I think he's highly overrated. I think he's an overrated person. I don't think he's going to make it. I noticed that the press, in fact, I was watching this morning one of the shows, and they were talking about Marco Rubio. I mean, he's nowhere in the polls. I don't think he's going to make it.
You've been critical on immigration, but are there other issues?
Well, no, he's very critical. I'm very critical.
Yeah.
He was a member of the Gang of Eight, which basically wanted to have everybody come in and take over our country. All of a sudden, he went down in the polls, and he immediately changed and got out. He is totally driven by what the public thinks. Marco doesn't show up to votes. He doesn't do things that you're supposed to do. He got elected senator. And, the same thing happened to him in the Florida Senate, if you look. And I know a lot about Florida. I'm there. You saw the poll that came out today where I'm beating him and Bush by a lot and Carson by a lot in Florida. I know Florida better than they know Florida.
Now, isn't it interesting that it took a Donald Trump to point out the record of laziness that Rubio had when he was in government in Florida? Why didn't Bush do that? Bush didn't go far enough. Bush just sticks his toe in the lake. He doesn't really jump in. But there again, there's Trump getting after it. And so this is why I was so taken by Rubio's speech yesterday in front of a crowd saying he wants to be the vocational president. He doesn't have an economic pulse. He doesn't know where he wants to go. Most of the folks that end up coming out of Votex in this country, they end up in trades, right? And they need representation. And the way they advance is through collective bargaining. The way they advance is by joining a union. This, of course, is what Rubio hates. He's one of the biggest union haters out there. So I was waiting for Rubio to explain how someone coming out of a vocational school with a trade is going to advance themselves in a society where there is the man. And it's a person who is going to have a trade, but also working for a wage. Unions in this country raise the level of pay, raise the level of benefits, and give a voice to people in the working place who are able to do a lot of different things. And quite often the same thing, which is a trade. So Rubio's mixed up. He sees this number of 51% of Americans are under 30%. He's trying to come up with a way to enamor voters that, hey, he's really on our side. He's not. And of all the Republican candidates, the guy who is more receptive to wage earners because he has signed checks and created jobs is Trump. Whether you like it or not, Trump has created more jobs than any of these people. He's written more paychecks than any of these people. And he keeps hammering home that he's negotiated more deals. I bet that there is every Republican presidential candidate on that on that stage that would love to have the business experience of Donald Trump. They're all envious of Trump. They're all trying to come up with new and innovative ways to present themselves to make people think that they really are deal cutters as well. But they're not. And a guy who is simply not a deal cutter is Marco Rubio. And Rubio, all of a sudden, in his mid-40s, is trying to explain to the American people that, well, he knows more about foreign policy than anybody. Give me a freaking break. He goes on to tell it like it is. Trump does about Rubio.
I think he's a highly overrated person. I've called him a lightweight. I think he's a lightweight. He says how handsome he is, how good. I don't know. I think I'm better looking than he is. Am I better looking than him? So no, but they're talking about he's so handsome. He's so wonderful. Another thing I didn't like about him, and I don't like about him, he should have been more loyal to Bush.
Well, that is an issue in business. Loyalty. It is a huge issue. And Rubio, I think, is deep sixed himself. I don't think he's going anywhere. All right. Now, what about the Carson factor? I've been watching Carson for months. I just really haven't been able to put my finger on it the way Trump was able to. Here it is.
I think that Ben just doesn't have the experience. Say, look, I'm going to make the greatest deals you've ever seen on trade. We're going to run the military properly. I'm going to take care of the vets. Ben can't do those things. Ben cannot deal on trade. Ben cannot deal with... It's not his thing, George. You're born with it. It's not his thing. He hasn't got the temperament for it. It's not the right thing for him.
It isn't. It isn't the right thing for him. And every time I look at Ben Carson now, I'm going to be thinking about that soundbite. It's just not the right thing for him. He's just not the fit. He is not the fit. He doesn't have the experience. He doesn't have the insight. He just doesn't have what it takes to be president. It's so simple. I couldn't see the forest because of the trees on Carson. Not to mention he's been saying some crazy shit. Here's the problem and the frustration for the Republicans at this point. We all say that this is the huge election, that this election coming up is so huge. What drives this country is the judiciary. The Republicans learned this a long time ago. They wanted to get the Supreme Court. George W. Bush is one of the greatest conservative presidents the Republicans ever had. Why? Because he put two extremists on the Supreme Court. And he also gave 2 rounds of tax cuts to the wealthy and concentrated the wealth and gave them an opportunity to control the government through money, even more so than what they had been in the past. So Bush actually, for the conservative movement, was a great president. So who's the next president? The next president is going to be looking definitely at some Supreme Court appointments. If Cruz is the president, wow, you can say goodbye to Roe. You can say there's going to be a hell of a lot more Hobby Lobby. You can say that workers' rights is out the door. You can say that free trade is going to go nuts on American workers, and more than 50% of the people in this country will be making less than $25,000 a year. He's an elitist, there's no doubt. So this election is huge when it comes to the Supreme Court and the judiciary. And what do the Republicans have? They have spent so many years trying to obstruct Obama and not come up with a vision for the country that they are now stuck with Donald Trump. Not to say that in a terrible way, because Trump has some qualities, but he's not the guy they want. He's not the guy that they envisioned. If you had said 2 years ago that Trump was going to be where he is right now, the Republicans would have been giving you the finger. Okay? But he is right now their number one guy. When we come back, Ruth Conniff. On the Democratic race, Hillary Clinton is gaining. What does Bernie Sanders have to do? And I was wondering, if Bernie Sanders would talk like Donald Trump, would it be a closer race? We'll talk about that. Jane Kleeb joins us from Bold, Nebraska, because TransCanada has done an about face on the Keystone XL Pipeline, a perfect example of how activism works. And we got a lot more. Stay with us. This is Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team bring you this production. We're right back. Hey, folks, you've heard me talk about BioGreen Clean. I'm going to show you right now on my airplane just how tough this is. I want you to keep in mind, chemical-free, 100% plant-derived, biodegradable. It is the safest cleaner that you can get, and it's the most effective. Go to our website, wegoted.com, or go to biogreenclean.com, www.biogreenclean, and order today.
We perpetuate a culture of crime all the way from Wall Street right down to the main street in our hometowns. It's worse than it has been since FDR took control of the problem and said we can't count on industry taking care of the American labor. They probably have already engaged into some type of criminal cover-up, and the law prohibits the government from even doing anything about it.
Catch America's lawyer Mike Papantonio on YouTube at youtube.com/GoLeftTV.
Okay, it's Hillary. It wasn't just a one-week bump. Bernie Sanders is now taking out his TV ads. I think it's like a $2 million buy in Iowa. I don't know what that's going to do. He is unquestionably the biggest crowds, the most donors, and some real good basics to move his campaign forward. But he's not moving forward in the polls right now, and Hillary has got the bump. What do we make of this? Ruth Conniff joins us, editor of the Progressive Magazine. Ruth, good to have you with us.
Great to be here, Ed.
All right, your analysis of the move that Hillary has made in the most recent poll.
Well, I think she did really, really well in the debate. And, in a funny way, even though she is, for the second presidential election cycle, not in a row, but for the second presidential election cycle, she sort of came on as the inevitable candidate, got the big money, staffed up, built this kind of momentum of inevitability, and then had serious questions about her viability raised by an insurgent candidate who had a lot more grassroots enthusiasm. The last time around was 2008 with Obama, this time around with Bernie Sanders. She, in a funny way, kind of came back, I think, in the debate as if she were the underdog, because it was very well known that people were worried about Hillary Clinton as a Democratic candidate, and that Biden was thinking of getting in, and that donors might jump, and that all that careful work that she did for all that time might just fall apart because people thought she wasn't good enough. And then she came out in the debate, and she was poised, she was warm, she was really well-versed in the issues, and people thought, wow, she's great. And Biden shut down his exploratory, campaign buzz, and she began to really pick up some traction. And I think that's a lot of what happened, is that people thought, oh, she's actually a very qualified candidate for president after all.
NBC News Wall Street Journal poll now shows that 8 in 10 Democrats in this country are okay with Hillary, 61% with Bernie. What does Bernie have to do? I mean, if he doesn't win Iowa and New Hampshire, is it over? Would it be over earlier? You believe that? I do, too.
I do, because I think also the other thing that, is going to happen is that Hillary is very strong in the South. She and Bill Clinton have a lot of support in the African-American community. The South Carolina primary, which is the black primary, which is coming up fast, she's going to do very well. So I think in order to establish himself as a credible contender, Bernie Sanders has to do what it looked like he was going to do, which is win Iowa and New Hampshire, or at least one of them.
Okay, so you're in the war room with the Sanders camp. What's your advice? What's the next plateau? What's the next jump for Bernie? To sit back and see if these ads in Iowa work? To keep pounding the turf in his neighboring state of New Hampshire? I mean, Bernie seems to be brilliant on the basics, but he does not get anywhere near the media attention that the other candidates get. There's a narrative out there that Bernie can't win, which I think has been put out by some super PACs that are favorable to Hillary. And there's a lack of confidence on the part of some Democrats that Bernie can't win a national campaign. I don't subscribe to any of that. I think when it comes down to the middle class issues, and you got 51% of the American people making less than $30,000 a year, if those people get motivated, and if there is a voter turnout, Bernie could be the resurgent, insurgent candidate. But you're in the war room, Ruth. What do you say?
I think one thing that needs to happen for Bernie Sanders is he needs some really fantastic surrogates to get out there, young people, people of color, women, and they need to build this narrative that why not? Why not now? If not now, when? And to say, look, everything that you're talking about economic inequality is true. Just the other night, I went to see Robert Reich. I interviewed him for the Progressive magazine, and he packed the downtown public library here in Madison, Wisconsin. He is like Bernie Sanders. It's not that he is himself a rock star, right? Yeah. But he has a message about economic inequality that really resonates, exactly as you say. People are hurting in this country, and the breath of fresh air that is a politician who will get out and say, you know what, America, we have a major problem. Our middle class is in jeopardy. It's been in decline for a while, and we're really looking at not being able to send your college. We're looking at a future that's really frightening to the majority of Americans. And we have time to do something about it. We are the richest nation on earth. That message is incredibly resonant for people. And I think what needs to happen is that Bernie needs to be warmed up a little. There was a big story about how he kind of grabs people's hands and keeps moving. He's no Bill Clinton, that's who he is. I think he needs to be warmed up a little. I think he needs to make the sale to black Americans and women. And I think there needs to be this momentum for this message that one thing he's doing now is he's separating himself from Hillary, which is good. He's talking more specifically about the differences. But the other thing is just this hopeful message. The feeling that people had in their hearts in 2008 with the Obama campaign was, you know what, it seems impossible, but why not? I actually can begin to envision this. And I think that's, it's an ad campaign, it's surrogates getting out there, it's young people, women, black people talking about it. I think that could really give him a bump.
Great take. I totally agree. Hadn't heard it that way. You can never give up hope, and you can never stop selling hope. That's for sure. Ruth Conniff, always a pleasure. Good to have you with us.
Great to be with you, Ed.
You bet. From the Progressive Magazine, Ruth Conniff. When we come back, John Barrasso, senator from Wyoming, says that it could be over for Obamacare. Really? Wendell Potter joins us. And also coming up, Jane Kleeb talking about the Keystone XL Pipeline and how that project is all but in the ground, as in with a gravestone on it. Stay with us. We're right back.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania to the auto factories of Michigan to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
You know what amazes me is that the Republicans over the years since 2010 have not come up with a concise, easily understood, presentable, and affordable health care plan. They've spent more time criticizing Obamacare. You know the story. The fact is you got millions of Americans whose lives have been turned around. No one ever said that the prices weren't going to go up. But they haven't been the double-digit increases we saw in years before the Affordable Care Act. But they're still on the offensive. In fact, John Barrasso, who is a doctor, a senator from Wyoming, he's the number 4 ranking member on the Senate leadership team. He says that prices keep rising and service keeps fading. He says it should not surprise the administration that people are not signing up. He writes this in a Washington Times op-ed. He says that costs are soaring, cancellations are mounting, and choices are disappearing. Is that the truth? Let's go to Wendell Potter, who's a former health insurance executive, author of Deadly Spin and Obamacare, What's in It for Me, regular contributor to healthinsurance.org and the Huffington Post. Mr. Potter, good to have you back with us.
Thank you, Ed. Glad to be back.
Are costs soaring? Are cancellations mounting? And our choices disappearing. That's what's written.
Yeah, that's certainly an exaggeration. It's overstatement. The fact is that premiums, they're increasing, like you said. No one promised that they would not increase, but they're increasing very modestly in most places. In fact, some people will see rate decreases. In other states, they'll see more increases than were expected because we're dealing with insurance companies here. Private insurance companies are always looking to make some money. Yeah. But on the other hand, we've seen also millions and millions of people coming into coverage who haven't had coverage before. So it's working on so many different levels. The rules have been changed to benefit consumers, and that's very important for all of us.
Is there any way that Obamacare could end up going away at this point? What could the Republicans do? Of course, you got Ryan in there, Speaker of the House. They hold the Senate, win the White House. You think this would really happen?
No, it's not going to happen. And frankly, the House and Senate leadership don't want it to go away. They know that if they were to succeed doing what so many of them are saying they'd like to do, it would be devastating for the Republican Party because you would see that many millions of people would have their coverage taken away from them permanently because we go back to the old days in which insurance companies could blackball you because of a pre-existing condition or charge you far, far more than they otherwise could. So they know that. It's just all rhetoric.
So when do the Democrats and those who supported the Affordable Care Act, and there aren't any Republicans, so it is a partisan issue, When do they claim victory on this? I mean, really, because it seems like there's no political gain here. It's almost as if the country is tired of the health care debate. They're tired of the story. I get that sense.
I agree with you. I think they are. I think the country has health care fatigue, and I think after the 2016 elections, I think you'll start seeing, and maybe during the latter part of this race for the presidency, we'll start seeing Democrats own this legislation, on this act, because it has meant so much of a difference in many people's lives. And as both candidates, when I say both, I mean Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, they both have said there are things that we need to do beyond the Affordable Care Act. So I think that we'll have to go through yet one more election cycle before Democrats will be willing to claim victory and own this.
Unless I'm missing it, Bush, Cruz, Rubio, Carson, Trump, none of them are talking about health care. Not to anything beyond a sentence on a stump speech. None of them are talking about it.
Not at all. Hardly a soundbite. And you look closely, what they're proposing is almost nothing there. I've written a column about what Ben Carson would like to do, which is absolutely ridiculous. He wants to put us all into health savings accounts, and the government give us each $2,000 a year, which would buy absolutely nothing. But beyond that, nobody is talking about anything, and it's just silliness what they are proposing.
Wendell Potter, always great to visit. I appreciate your time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Take care now.
You bet. Wendell Potter with us here on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. When we come back, Jane Kleeb. If you think that activism and advocacy doesn't work, just look to the middle of the country. This is a major shift by a major corporation in the fossil fuels industry. This is a big loss for the Koch brothers. Is this a real surrender? That story next. Stay with us. It's time to continue our conversation about mechanical insulation. Mechanical insulation is for the piping systems in our nation's commercial and industrial facilities. Facility owners are burning up billions of dollars through the lack of mechanical insulation on these piping systems. Call the iSave team. Insulation saves America valuable energy, and this team of energy conservation specialists is shovel-ready to save you money. Visit iSaveTeam.org to have a specialist give your plant an energy audit. This is one of my favorite stories of all time. We were just talking a moment ago with Ruth Conniff about hope. You never stop selling hope, and nothing's lost until you give up. A few years ago, I went to the middle of the country to put a spotlight on a fight that some landowners had with a major corporation, a multinational, that wanted to put a pipeline over the Olagala Aquifer and do a big risk and bring the dirtiest oil to market. There were comments in committee hearings, for instance, Mary Landrieu, who's no longer in the Senate, saying that this is the cleanest oil. There were a lot of people who were on bended knee to the oil industry. You know what? They lost. The Koch brothers lost. The story that's unfolding now is that TransCanada, the company behind the controversial Keystone XL Pipeline, they had a big political loss in the last year when Bernie Sanders decided to run for president, put a spotlight on this, when he turned Hillary Clinton on this, when the advocacy groups in the middle of the country didn't give up, when the Native Americans in this country continued to fight for their rights. They did demonstrations. They went to Washington. They did everything they had to do. And the story reads today that this pipeline that was going to go from Canada to the United States Gulf Coast, which a lot of it has already been constructed, has hit a major snag. And on Monday, TransCanada sent a letter to Secretary John Kerry requesting that the State Department suspend its review of the pipeline application. Is this surrender? Jane Kleeb, Bold, Nebraska, has been in the middle of this fight and leading this fight for a long time. Jane, is congratulations in order? I think it is. Good to have you with us.
Hey, Ed. Well, I think yes. I think we're one step closer to a full rejection, but as you know, nothing's going to give peace of mind to farmers and ranchers and tribes until the president signs a full rejection, because it's still lingering out there. But the State Department has not granted the pause. The State Department and the White House both have to agree to grant the request that TransCanada has now put in front of them, which is to pause their application. So we're hoping that the White House does not do that and instead fully rejects the pipeline.
Okay. So, but what does this mean? I mean, what do you think TransCanada is thinking? How could this be a pathway to a successful conclusion for them?
Yeah, essentially the only play that they had left was to get a pause long enough that they hope that then a Republican gets elected into office, or that they hope that a Democrat gets elected into office, that they can change their mind, and then they can get their approval. That's literally the last play that they have. They know that this White House, that this president, that this Secretary of State are leaning towards rejecting the permit because of all the climate implications and the water implications for landowners. So this was their last play. I mean, we knew that they were going to do this play. I wrote about this 2 weeks ago when TransCanada decided to submit their application to the Public Service Commission here in Nebraska, which for years they, were balking at, saying that they didn't have to because they had a legal route. So we knew that this was going to be their next move.
And the eminent domain issues are still alive and well and being fought out of the state courts, correct?
That's correct. So there's still a lawsuit both in Holt and York County where TransCanada also asked those judges to dismiss the case, similarly how they're asking the State Department to put a pause. Those judges are still moving forward with those lawsuits. We have another court hearing both in late November and early December on those lawsuits.
Isn't this a benchmark model for eminent domain and property rights in this country?
Yes, it's not only a model, but it's also a real test. If you are a registered Republican and you are looking at the field of presidential candidates, every single one of them supports Keystone XL. And, you had Rand Paul out there in Iowa talking about how he's against eminent domain for the Bakken pipeline that's trying to cross that state. But yet he is completely fine with eminent domain being used for Keystone XL. So I think that we have huge barriers to overcome in our state and in our country to change eminent domain. Eminent domain should never be used for private gain. It's kind of a basic fundamental value that we should all hold. But if you're a registered Republican and you're listening to the Ed Show, you really have to question your presidential candidates and the choices of your elected leaders because they all support it right now.
I remember walking down the streets of Washington, D.C. With all of those protesters, and you were leading the charge. And I asked you a question if you thought that this was going to get kicked to 2016, and you said yes. I believe that was back in 2013 when we had that conversation, several years ago, maybe even beyond that. And here we are. And Hillary Clinton has moved on this issue. How much of an impact do you think that had on TransCanada?
I think Secretary Clinton's coming out against the pipeline was a huge moment. And really, that was because of, as you said, Bernie Sanders. It was because of people like you. It was because of citizens all along the route. Without that, I think TransCanada would have felt very comfortable if this pipeline got put onto her desk. So they're essentially hoping, fingers crossed, standing on one leg, that a Republican is somehow magically going to get elected so they can get their pipeline, which obviously we don't see happening. If their pipeline if the White House does grant a pause, Ed, that means that landowners in Nebraska have to now go through the Public Service Commission, which is going to cost us tens of thousands of dollars, and continue to go through all these other legal challenges. And so really, our plea is to the White House is for them to finally put a nail in this coffin and to fully reject the pipeline. Okay.
Well, from one advocate broadcaster to an advocate worker and activist, big hugs, my friend. Great job.
Thanks,
Keep it going.
Thanks,
Jane,
man.
You bet. Jane Kleeb, Bold Nebraska, with us here on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team bring you this production. We are back tomorrow.